Welcome back now for the news in detail. We start with Syria, where Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces and the government have agreed to join forces to resist Turkey's ongoing military operation. Ankara plans to establish a border security zone in northern Syria. In a separate statement, the government of President Bashar al-Assad and the SDF said they reached an agreement during urgent talks in Damascus over the weekend. Syria's official media reported that government forces have begun to move northwards towards the provinces of Hasaka and Raqqa. The announcement came as the US ordered almost all ground forces to pull out from Syria. In an interview, Defense Secretary Mark Esper said the US was withdrawing its troops to avoid getting caught up in the fast escalating clashes. Turkey has captured key border towns since launching its military operation last week. Now, for more on this developing story, we are joined from Istanbul by political analyst Can Hassau. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Hassau. So, Mr. Hassau, can you tell us, the situation is fast becoming increasingly complicated in northern Syria. So, is Turkey in danger of being pulled into a full-fledged war with the Syrian government? Mr. Hassau, can you hear me? Okay, Mr. Hassau, are you there? I think we've dropped the connection, so we'll try to get back to the connection. Earlier, we was talking about the Syrian war in the northern Syria now, and Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, how the government have agreed to join forces to resist Turkey's ongoing military operation. We have been joined by John Hassau once again. John. Right, John. The situation is fast becoming increasingly complicated in northern Syria. So is Turkey in danger of being pulled into a full-fledged war with the Syrian government?
Well, actually, the Syrian army have used this tactic before joining the PKK or the YPG in the region in order to eliminate Turkish advance. We've seen that during the Afrin operation. And in this operation, especially in Matiga Air Force area, the Kurdish forces holded the Russian flag, and they wore the Syrian the Syrian army uniforms just to stop the Turkish army. And excuse me, could we repeat this again?
Yes, sure. Please continue.
I have a situation. No, I mean, can we stop it for a while?
Yes, absolutely. We'll take you back once we can re-establish a connection with you. As we were talking about the Syria-related story about how the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces and the government have agreed to join forces to resist Turkey's ongoing military operation, we were talking to John Hassau, is a political analyst from Istanbul, about the situation in northern Syria. And right now, we'll move on with the news stories, and we'll try to get back to this story as soon as we can. Now, moving on, Russia's President Vladimir Putin will fly into Riyadh today for talks with Saudi Arabia's leadership now. Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman are expected to discuss tensions in the Gulf as well as wars in Syria and Yemen. In an interview, Putin praised Saudi Arabia for its help to formulate a political settlement in Syria. He condemned the September 14 airstrikes on Saudi oil facilities.
If anyone believes that acts such as the seizing of tankers or strikes against oil infrastructure could in any way affect the cooperation between Russia and our Arab friends, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, or they could affect or destroy our interaction in the context of OPEC+, they are very wrong.
Putin said he and the Saudi leadership would talk about measures to avert any political fallout on international oil markets. And the visit of President Putin to Saudi Arabia also is of great importance because of US President Trump approved a mass weapons sales to Saudi Arabia. So we'll even have to ask about that. as Russia's president will fly into Riyadh today for very important talks with Saudi Arabia's leadership now. Putin and Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman are expected to discuss tensions in the Gulf as well as the wars in Syria and Yemen, where the crises are moving on. Now, for more on this, we are joined live from Moscow by our correspondent Julia Chapman. Julia, can you tell us, in interviews prior to his departure for Saudi Arabia, President Putin has spoken out against September 14th attacks on the Saudi Aramco production facilities and other attacks on tankers. So, Julia, how worried is Russia about the tensions in the Gulf?
Well, Russia is certainly concerned about tensions in the Gulf, and it has been supporting Saudi Arabia through that. It's offered it the S-400 missile system, once again saying that Saudi Arabia needs to be able to defend itself. But what Russia hasn't done is echoed Riyadh's criticism and accusation that Tehran was behind these two attacks on the oil production facilities in Saudi Arabia. Russia is, of course, an ally of Iran, works very closely with Iran on a number of issues, not least the JCPOA, Iran nuclear deal, and of course in Syria as well, where both sides are backing the same side of the conflict. That is, of course, the Syrian government under Bashar al-Assad. But Russia does certainly keep a very close eye on events in the Gulf. Russia, of course, very concerned about what these attacks could mean for global oil prices. Of course, we saw oil prices skyrocket after those attacks took place, and so Russia's energy minister was quick to step in and offer to increase production from the Russian side in the wake of those attacks.
Right, Julia, and also President Putin has praised Saudi Arabia for its role in helping to find a settlement in Syria, although the two countries are at odds over Iran's role in the conflict. So what do you expect the Syria-specific element of his talks with the Saudis to yield?
Well, we are expecting President Vladimir Putin to raise the issue of Syria on this trip to Riyadh today. And we expect them to be discussing, of course, the latest developments that have been going on in northeastern Syria with the Turkish operation to push out Kurdish forces there. That's something that Russia is very concerned about, because Russia is very worried about maintaining Syria's territorial integrity. And so that's something that they're going to be discussing today. But of course, Russia is looking forward to, at the end of the month, when we're expecting the first meeting of Syria's constitutional committee. That's something that has been a brainchild of Russian President Vladimir Putin himself, and he might be calling on Saudi Arabia today to get involved in that. He has expressed an interest previously in Arab countries being involved in the settlement in Syria. He says that he wants to see peace in Syria, and he is expecting that to be happening imminently, which is why, of course, Russia has been so concerned with the latest developments that have been going on in northeastern Syria with this Turkish operation. So he will be calling on Saudi Arabia to be backing the Syrian Constitutional Committee, to be looking forward, pressing ahead with peace efforts in the country.
Right, Saudi Arabia and Russia are the world's two largest oil exporters and have actively cooperated to stabilize international oil prices. So, Julia, what further measures are expected to come under discussion in Riyadh?
Well, we don't have any specific details of what that could entail today, but we do know, as you say, that the two countries have worked very closely on trying to stabilize world oil prices. Of course, they are both members of the OPEC Plus arrangement, and that's something that they've been working on over the past couple of years to help maintain stable oil prices. As I mentioned, though, these attacks on the oil production facilities in Saudi Arabia last month certainly sent oil prices into there was a big jump in oil prices after that, and that's something that's been very concerning to Russia. Of course, Saudi Arabia is responsible for roughly 10% of the world's oil production, and it was cut in half in the immediate aftermath of those two attacks. And so that's been a huge knock-on effect on oil prices. That has an impact, of course, on Russia and the other large oil-producing nations. So we expect that to be at the top of the agenda today, because oil prices are of very much importance to Russia. We're also expecting the two countries to discuss deals in investment and economic cooperation between the two countries that could be worth up to $2 billion US. That could be ranging from fields of agriculture, transport, and of course petrochemicals as well. So those are some of the things we're expecting to come out of the talks today as President Vladimir Putin visits Riyadh for the first time in more than 10 years.
Well, everyone is forward to that meeting. Thanks, Julia. That was our Moscow correspondent, Julia Chapman, giving us insight on Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to Saudi Arabia later today. Now, we also have with us Dr. Abdul Aziz Al-Ghashian from London, is a political analyst. So, Mr. Ghashian, Putin's visit to Riyadh comes at a critical juncture in the Middle East affairs. So, what do you think Riyadh hopes to hear from the Russian president? I think we're facing some technical difficulties. We were earlier talking to our correspondent Julia, who was informing us about the visit of President Trump to Saudi Arabia and how important it is, and how Putin has praised Saudi Arabia for its role in helping to find a settlement in Syria. And now we're moving on with the news bulletin, and we'll try to get back to this if we can. Prime Minister KP Sharma Olgi says Nepal will never allow its territory to be used for separatist activities in China. Meeting China's President Xi Jinping in Kathmandu, Olgi says Nepal firmly supports the One China policy. President Xi says any attempt to split China will end in vain. Both countries signed at least 15 agreements, including a deal to expand a railway link between the Himalayan nation and Tibet. The link will be part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, which Nepal joined in 2017. Nepal sees the rail link with China as an alternative to its dependence on India. Son of former U.S. Vice President Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, says he is stepping down from the board of a Chinese company. The firm was founded to spend Chinese investment capital outside the country. Biden faced severe criticism from President Donald Trump for working with foreign firms. Biden said he will not work for a foreign-owned company if his father becomes president in the 2020 presidential elections. His attorney, George Messier, said Biden undertook these business activities independently. Earlier in a telephone call, Trump asked Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to probe his political rival Joe Biden and his son. Democrats have already launched a formal impeachment inquiry against the president for violating his oath. Well, coming up next in the bulletin after a short break is... demonstration held at Sydney's Bondi Beach. Americans seek cheap healthcare abroad. Welcome back. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Muslim world is facing numerous internal and external challenges. In a meeting with Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, Khan said unity among Muslim states is important. He also hailed Iran's support on the Kashmir issue. Earlier in a joint presser with President Hassan Rouhani, Khan said Islamabad is playing a facilitator's role between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The Prime Minister said a conflict in the Gulf region can hike oil prices, which will increase poverty in developing countries. He also said Pakistan will try to resume nuclear talks between the US and Iran. Over 200 university students in Indian Telangana state have held a candlelight march against the lockdown in occupied Kashmir. Over 70 members of the Jammu and Kashmir Students Association also took part in the demonstration. Talking to reporters, the students said, despite Indian media claims, there is no normalcy in the occupied valley. Meanwhile, families of thousands of arrested Kashmiris are facing immense difficulties to meet them. Family members wade through endless checkpoints in Srinagar, where they have to wait for several hours. The occupying forces have arrested over 13,000 Kashmiris, mostly youths, since August 5th. The New Delhi-imposed clampdown and communications blackout has now entered its 71st consecutive day. Now, in the United States, amid inflated healthcare costs, millions of Americans seek treatment abroad. Contributing to the ever-increasing medical tourism industry, the U.S. healthcare system is at the heart of a debate ahead of the 2020 presidential elections. This report has more.
Connecting through the San Diego airport, Veronica Merrill has arrived from Phoenix, Arizona for a medical procedure. From here, she'll cross the border into Mexico to have gastric bypass surgery, which isn't covered by her insurance unless doctors diagnose her as medically obese, precisely what Veronica is trying to avoid.
Because it's so much cheaper. And here my insurance wouldn't even cover it. So Tijuana is actually something you can afford. It was like $4,000 to get it done, and here I don't even know. It's probably like $12,000 to $15,000.
And for that price, the medical tourism agency she contacted takes care of everything. She is among the nearly 2 million Americans who travel abroad each year for medical reasons, due to a lack of affordable care in the U.S., where health costs are the highest in the world. Veronica's surgery will take place at a hospital that exclusively treats foreign patients, many from the U.S., where experts say a lack of price regulation is driving medical tourism.
Hi. I'm Dr. Cáceres.
Nice to meet
I'm your surgeon.
Sometimes patients worry a little bit about safety. Really, the city is very safe. We have a great experience because we have a large volume of patients. We perform more operations than a doctor in the US.
After a successful surgery and 24 hours of rest, Veronica will be ready to cross the border again and return to Arizona. Back home in the States, healthcare is a central issue in the 2020 elections, and several Democratic candidates have proposed universal coverage, something Veronica considers logical. But even if Medicare for All were introduced, industry officials still see a long life for medical tourism from the U.S.
In business stories, stock markets across Asia have spiked in response to the mini trade deal struck between the US and China on Friday. Defying poor Chinese trade data for September, the Shanghai Composite has gained about 1.3%. Asia's most valuable index, the Nikkei 225 in Tokyo, is also trading more than 1% higher. The Hang Seng Index is about 1% higher after investors pushed aside concerns about another weekend of violent unrest in Hong Kong. Encouraged by the trade deal between Beijing and Washington, international oil prices have edged up 0.5%. Now let's have a look at the weather update. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.